Missouri has conducted its first execution since May of last year, the 7th in the United States. And wait until you find out the details on this. So this is Ernest Johnson, who was on death row in Missouri, was executed yesterday after the US Supreme Court rejected a petition earlier in the day that had sought to delay the execution, citing an intellectual disability. Now, I don't want you to think that the Supreme Court didn't put a lot of thought into this and the stakes in this case, except that the entirety of the statement from the court was the application for stay of execution of sentence of death presented to Justice Kavanaugh and by him referred to the court is denied. The petition for a writ of cert is denied. And that's it. And with those two sentences apparently headed up by Justice Kavanaugh, Ernest Johnson was executed. Now, Ernest Johnson was originally convicted of robbing a gas station and murdering 3 clerks nearly 27 years ago. He was killed by lethal injection. You can see a photo of him that we'll put up here. And look, obviously, nobody is saying that killing 3 people is not a horrendous crime, whether it was a year ago or 27 years ago. It is obviously a horrendous crime. That said, he wasn't just held in prison to stop him from murdering people. The state killed him. They murdered him. And what you should understand about him, on top of the obvious issue with allowing the state to decide who lives and who dies, is that attorneys for Ernest Johnson say that he was ineligible for the death penalty because multiple IQ tests had shown he had the mental capacity of a child and read at a primary school level. He was born with fetal alcohol syndrome after his mother drank heavily during her pregnancy. And in fact, he's been missing 1/5 of his brain tissue since 2008 after undergoing surgery to remove a brain tumor. And so we'll have more on this, but JR, we've talked about a lot of different executions on this show, on other shows on the network. The state just won't get off of this belief that it should decide, and it is totally justifiable, ethical, moral for the state to decide that 27 years after committing a crime, now you must die.
Yeah, I always wonder what families may feel about this, because that's who they're supposed to be working for. Anytime you see about any kind of case, even when it doesn't have to do with death penalty, just someone getting convicted of a murder, they shoot to the family of the victim, right? That makes sense, because those are the people who are the most affected by this, negatively affected by it, and their whole lives have changed. And I always wonder what the family thinks about this, especially after it's been this long. Because I remember way back, early Young Turks, I interviewed Warwick Dunn, former NFL player. His mother was murdered when he was like a teenager. And he had to grow up really fast. Became an NFL player, did all these things. And I asked him, because I didn't get it. I was like, and his whole thing is he visited the guy who murdered his mom on death row. And he was against it. And I was like, how can you come with this kind of approach? He's like, well, listen, what does that do for my mom? Is she coming back from that? We have to see what it is that happened to him and where this came from. And honestly, how this can't continue to happen, how we can prevent it rather than just feel that we're getting some kind of revenge. Because he himself just wouldn't feel better about it. That didn't end what happened to his mom or end his feelings about it. So it varies for every person. But if we're worried about the family, what is it the family wants, right? And if they want that, why does that become the thing that we do based off of nothing else?
Yeah.
So I get the vengeance point, because that's where I was too. I was like, the first thing I would want to do is get revenge. But if I went and got revenge, I'm not sure how I would feel about it. And that's just an age-old, adage. Sure. I feel like, or people wonder, do you really feel better now that you got your revenge? So if the state carries out, do we then feel better that they got my revenge?
Yeah.
It's not to prevent any more crime. That's for damn sure.
No, definitely not.
The first death row killing, did that mean there was never another one?
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be working if that is their argument. Yeah, they very often will say, it's about the victims. That is not a philosophical argument. That is a shield. They want to hide behind people we feel bad for to continue doing a thing they want to do. I personally, I care about the feelings of the family and think that they should have no bearing whatsoever on the consequences. And everyone thinks that to some degree. Okay, maybe some families are okay with the person being killed. Maybe others would like him to be set on fire. Do we let them? Maybe they want him to be ripped apart by wild dogs. Do we let them? No, so there's a limit to how much we're willing to abide by the emotional reactions of people who've been, they've suffered a tragedy as a result of this. The person's in jail for the rest of their life. That's really bad. Okay, that's what I will say. Now, I want to give you an update on some of what was done to try to stop this execution from going forward. So there had been this legal back and forth over the fact that considering the brain tumor that he had, that he might suffer seizures if they did lethal injection to him. Look, I would say, and maybe this is controversial, I don't know how much I care about brief suffering before an execution. You might say, well, why would you say that, John? Don't you care about suffering? I would say the suffering is an existential suffering. It's the death. In comparison to that, the suffering of a minute or 20 minutes, the person's dead at the end of it. I think focusing too much on the suffering, I get it. It's again trying to make us emotional about this. I think we need to grapple with whether the death should happen. That is, to me, 100 times as important as the suffering. But that said, it also didn't work as a legal argument here. The Supreme Court didn't care about that. There were people who tried to step in at the last moment, including Pope Francis himself, appealing to Governor Mike Parson. I believe it's Republican Governor Mike Parson, so not going to let some religious leader stop him from doing that. Let's see, Representative Cori Bush, as well as Emanuel Cleaver II, both Democrats in Missouri, also asked Mr. Parson to spare him, saying it would be unconstitutional to execute him based on his intellectual disabilities. They put out a letter saying, like slavery and lynching did before it, the death penalty perpetuates cycles of trauma, violence, and state-sanctioned murder in Black and brown communities. We urge you to correct these injustices using every tool available, including the power to grant clemency. That did not happen. Mike Parson was not interested in that. He announced on Monday that the state would, quote, deliver justice under his definition and carry out the lawful sentence Mr. Johnson received in accordance with the Missouri Supreme Court's order. They only care about what's lawful, which is why they outlaw abortion after 50 years of it being the law of the land. They only care about maintaining the legal status quo. That's what they care about, JR.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Again, you want to get to the reasons why they want this, and it's purely political. What are the reason would many politicians want to jump in and make sure their names are announced with being in support of doing it, right? It's so then they can go campaign, and this is age-old, campaign and say, I'm tough on crime. How are you tough on crime? How does this then prevent crime? Give me some numbers, give me statistics, give me the reasons why you've made the decisions you've made, and how that then goes to maybe someone else's mother, sister, uncle, brother to not be murdered. How do we prevent it? And you mentioned things like, how now it's suddenly unlawful for women to choose what happens with their body in abortion decisions, right? So if we're changing all these things and we're worried about the law and preventative measures, we can prevent unwanted pregnancies with education, with tools, with giving kids, teenagers, adults even ways to prevent pregnancies before they happen. We can get rapists. We can prevent more of those types of things with laws and preventive measures for rapists and all those things that Governor Abbott's talking about in Texas. Are we doing those things? Or we just wait until afterwards, after the crimes are committed, after the things happen, and they go, hey, I'm a politician, I'm tough on this. Are you tough on it? Or are you just responding to it and benefiting from it?
Yeah. All nonsense. Yeah, we need to end it. I'm gonna jump in. Cori Bush put out a tweet. This wasn't justice. This was cruelty. Abolish the death penalty. I agree. And by the way, his final statement is available. I'm not gonna read it, but you can tell from the statement. Yes, he does clearly have some sort of difficulties. I don't know what grade level he reads at, but clearly he had issues. I personally, again, maybe people disagree. I don't know why that should necessarily influence the death penalty. Death penalty is wrong. It's wrong for all people, for the state to decide that 27 years after a crime, now you need to be killed. We can't have you there any longer. Suddenly we have to have the execution of the law, as Parson says. But anyway, the state killed him. 7th execution this year. We've been in a year and a half of an incredible amount of death. The state wants to get in on it. And
by the way, my very last thought on this
in prisons too, by the way.
Yeah, and my last thought on this is also when it comes to this being the standard, state makes mistakes. They make a lot of mistakes. Sometimes those mistakes are purposeful because prosecutors want to then advance their careers. Lives are part of advancing someone's career. Maybe they want to be a tough prosecutor and they need some convictions and death penalties under their belt in order to be seen that way by the public, because the public will be bloodthirsty for a revenge killing carried out by the state. So with that as the motivation, you may do things that are wrong. You may convict the wrong person purposefully just so you can get your advancement of your career. It happens all the time. Are we comfortable with that?
Yeah. God, and like the considerations of the governor, he's probably thinking like, if he does clemency, some Republican will primary and bring it up, and 100%. It's like entirely possible that would happen. Yeah, showing mercy. No, what are you trying to be? Some kind of like stereotypical Christian? No, don't show mercy. Kill that man.
For more political news, breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.